Hey guys, and welcome to this video episode of Popped Culture. For this episode, where we review the cult classic The Princess Bride, we are joined by children's author Dave Lees, author of the two books, The Institute of Fantastical Inventions and The Institute of Fantastical Inventions 2, Magnetic Attraction. We really want to thank Dave for joining us on this episode and another episode later this week. And I invite you guys to check out his two books. They are absolutely fantastic children's books. They're available at places like Booktopia and at Dymocks. So thanks again to Dave for joining us for this episode. And please check out some good Australian local authors. Welcome everybody to Pop Culture. I am Scott.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Monica.
And we are joined by a very special guest today. We have with us author of The Institute of Fantastical Inventions and its sequel, Magnetic Attraction, Mr. Dave Lees.
Thank you very much for having me. Very pleased to be here. And can I say this is the first podcast I've ever been? So long-time listener, first-time contributor.
Awesome. Wonderful.
We're very lucky to have you, and author of two fantastic children's books. If you have children, or if you just like reading children's books, imagine some strange old man sitting.
There are people who do.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Dave's books are fantastic, and you should absolutely check them out. And we are privileged to have you with us, sir.
Very kind of you. No, I'm really excited to be on here. I think this is a great podcast. I've been really enjoying your takes on popular culture. I love your irreverent sense of humor. So I'm really excited to be here. As I said to you earlier, I am the film rookie of the group, but that's fine. It's all about opinions, I've been told. And I've got plenty of those.
Yeah, Jerry.
I got plenty of those.
Definitely. That's all we need.
Yeah.
So we brought Dave on to this episode. We're talking about, of course, the cult classic film, The Princess Bride. I think one of the most potentially beloved films of all time. Although apparently not. We've read some opinions this morning that may differ with that. But personally, I think The Princess Bride is a lot like a dog, and I wouldn't trust someone who didn't like a dog.
That's so obscure. Scott, I don't know how to read that one.
That's fine. There's something wrong with you if you don't like dogs. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They're a noble animal.
Yeah.
And this film
it's certainly
really good.
It's certainly a classic, and it didn't actually come out in a way that was received that way. It's certainly one that grew on people, and I would say it's because it is a little bit out of left field in terms of this type of genre, ultimately, but we're used to it now. So if you watch it now, it probably doesn't seem as surprising as at the time. And yeah, but it's gold, pure gold in terms of that fantasy storytelling.
Well, I'll just jump in there. When you say it's like a dog, I mean, dogs want to be loved, don't they? And this is a film that wants to be loved, and it's kind of innocent and wants to be loved, and you've got to kind of give your heart to it, or kick it to the curb, as you might want to do to a dog. But I won't be doing that. But yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. That chat we were seeing on Facebook that revolves around some people not liking it, so I guess they're kicking the dog. Monica, your first impression of it?
Yeah, I start off by saying that I am a really big fan of the book. The Princess Bride, the book, is one of my favorites in the whole entire universe. It's an excellent novel. And I also really like the film. It's one of the few that I feel is a really successful adaptation. It gets the broad strokes right. It comes across as this postmodern B-grade fantasy adventure, which I think is what makes it so delightful and surprising. It subverts a lot of things, but still keeps some of the traditional aspects that you see in a fairy tale. And it's just delightful and out of left field and full of sharp wit and very funny. So it ticks all the boxes for me.
Yeah, it's come up with quite a few immortal lines that are bandied about still, that's for sure.
Oh, it's quotable.
Yeah, I would never go in a land war against Asia, so that's just a mistake.
Good advice, isn't it? We've got a current government that probably doesn't know.
I think it's sort of goes back to a sort of simpler form of storytelling where it's like the heroes are heroic, they're honorable, the villains are devious and bad, and to the point of like, you know, matricide, but whatever. It's just, it's so sweet in its intentions. And you don't get movies like that very often anymore. I think we've sort of become more cynical, and it's sort of odd the way it's built as this very sweet children's fairy tale, but in a kind of meta way.
Well, I mean, and talking about that time, like it does come out around the same time as the Naked Gun movies, right? Mid 80s, late 80s, which are also that parodic meta thing that are never quite cynical though. But I think this is sweeter than those. They're much more sour in their sense of humor, and I agree. And I love what Monica said about it. It's postmodern, but it never feels cynical to me. It just feels like it's having fun with the genre, not trying to be intellectual, but hitting the sweet spot of being witty. So yeah, that's my positive take on it.
I think a really big part of what makes this movie so successful is what other performances. You can tell everyone's just having a really good time. Like, yes, you have someone like Andre the Giant who is no, thespian or great actor, but he's good in the role of Fezzik and he's delightful. Yeah, his words are a bit garbled, but who cares? He's fun. He's a friendly, affable giant, And
I think he works really
he's a
well.
BFG.
Yeah, no, I would say I was actually just commenting this one. He's fantastic. His comic timing is so good. He's dry. He's absolutely warm. Every time you look at him, you want to like be hugged by him. He's such a great presence on screen. I mean, I don't know how much range he had beyond something like this, but gee, he's perfect for that role.
He's really good, and I also love the buddy cop quality vibe he has with Inigo as well, as they hatch their plan to sort of like get to Wesley so they can get to Count Rugen, the six-fingered man, so Inigo can have his revenge plot fulfilled. So those are the parts I really enjoy about the movie. It's just especially those two characters.
Well, I came to it like I watched it for the first time 2 nights ago, which is quite odd. Like,
you actually hadn't seen it before?
No, I'd never seen it, and it was an odd experience because I'd seen all the memes, and I had plenty of friends who just raved about it, and I don't know why I resisted watching it. I watched it in 2 halves. So I watched the first half, and thought, oh, this is a bit leaden. This is struggling a bit. There's some funny bits in the first half, the original sword fight, and the Inconceivable. There's a few good bits, but oh my god, it is leaden, and I don't know what happened, but I'd left it 24 hours and I watched the second half and I was absolutely bowled over by it and just charmed. So I'm not sure what the experience is like, watching it late in life, you've got all this cultural freight around it. And it's, I didn't come to it with innocent eyes. I thought, is this overrated? It's surely overrated the way people talk about it. But I was won over by the second half, and I retrospectively think about the first half now and think, oh no, it worked all the way through. Actually, it was fantastic, great fun.
Yeah, the characters through it. Sorry, you guys. That's right.
I saw it in my late teens, or 16, 17, which is probably out of I think where most people get introduced to it. And I think it was like my family growing up were like, we're not watching them, like my brothers and my father were like, we're not watching a movie called The Princess Bride. and it wasn't until my best mate was like, you don't get it, you got to watch it. and I was like, why didn't I see this when I was younger? I felt robbed.
It's just got some. Oh, sorry, Jason.
No, I was just going to say, I think the most potent time to have seen it was when it was released, because there it was subverting a lot of what you would have expected from it. And yes, the memes and, as you said, that cultural freight or loading that we have on it does change your view on it or your expectation of it. But I think the heart of it, it's pretty much summed up with I keep calling him Kevin Arnold. No wonder he is. The kid.
He has a name.
Fred Savage.
Fred Savage.
And Peter Falk. that sort of, that's the essence of it. And I was reading an introduction to The Princess Bride by William Goldman, and that beginning part was actually what he experienced in childhood, was his dad saying, I'm going to give you a story of this, and instead of baseball games being the main thing in life, and it might even have kissing in it, and he's sort of and they brought that into the film so well. It explicitly creates the structure of the acts. If you look back at it, you'll see that it's perfectly placed in these moments to give you that dramatic moments that it changes. But the characters are just so warm and authentic, and it sort of makes you feel like it's worthy of having that place that it has.
I will say, and I'm 48, but like that last scene where he said, "I will come back," the grandfather said, "I'll come back," I felt very, very emotional actually when he said, "I'll come back and reread it."
He goes, "As you wish."
As you wish, and I was like, I am totally there. I've actually completely bought that line. That was gorgeous.
Yeah, I will say the framing device for the film is so well translated from the book as well. The book is sort of a book within a book, because it's an abridged version of this tale told by this S. Morgenstern character, and Goldman's trying to give you this version of the story so his son will enjoy it in the same way that he did when his father read to him. So when you have the grandfather and the grandson, the grandson's sick in bed, he's obviously away from school, and he's telling him this story, and he's also adding in that kind of off commentary as well whenever there's an interruption in between acts. That happens in the book as well. You have Goldman coming in, sort of putting in a footnote or so, or making some kind of snide, cynical but very funny comment to completely interrupt the narrative, but you're still really interested to see what he's going to say.
Absolutely. And of course, he's written the screenplay as well, so
yeah,
he did.
The other characters as well. Sorry, go Dave. You go on that thread.
Just the absurdness. Like I watched it in two halves, as I said, and the bit that I came back in on, where they're in the swamp of the misery, or
the fire
swamp,
and he's battling the oversized rodent, which is already funny as a name. and then he throws it into the fire, and then it sort of saggers towards him, and Wesley he stabs it 3 times, and each time it gives
the shit out of it.
Yeah, but each time it gives this kind of like this really the pathos there of just the shudders each time, and that just broke me. I just thought, this is so funny and so sad all at once. And that's the kind of the essence of the film. It has it both ways all the time. It's like it's ludicrous and absurd, but also it is maybe not scary, but it's got sort of a visceral quality. Like that oversized rodent shuddered. It shuddered each blade time the blade went in.
You also see that mirrored in when Wesley is tortured by the machine in Count Rugen's lair as well. Like Rugen and Humperdinck have this almost King Leopold II quality, whereas their evil is kind of banal in a sense. And the Six-Fingered Man is sitting there being like, I want you to tell me what everything feels like when I put you through the machine. He wants an honest review of how it's torturing people, which is frightening but funny at the same time. I'm like, that is a psychopath.
It's for posterity.
Yeah.
Oh, and his response was perfect as well. He just whimpers.
He starts crying.
And just that slight homoerotic quality to it as well.
There is.
The suction. I'm going to suck the life out of you.
Yeah. 1 year at a time.
And that sort of comes back at the end too, where Wesley gives this horrific speech about what he's going to do to the to Prince Humperdinck, and he just surrenders in the most like dandy way. Oh yes, tie me up.
I think a lot of it also comes down to Cary Elwes's performance. He can sort of teeter on this extremely funny but also very threatening kind of character, and also his physical comedy, like when he's just been brought back to life by Billy Crystal, who is in a blink and you'll miss it scene. And he's with Inigo and Fezzik, and they're trying to sort of move his limbs. Fezzik is like moving his head around like a puppet so they can hatch a plan together. It's hysterical.
leaning over
straight
the
out an
wall.
acting handbook. That
Totally.
character, that's for sure.
Mm.
Can we talk briefly about the Billy Crystal scene, because
Yes,
it
please.
occurred to me like there's a couple of things politically that you just can't do anymore. One is
What is
the Billy Crystal
wife.
scene. It's like the very, very Jewish doctor who's very interested in how much money he will make out of it. Like sort of to the point of like when they're dead, you go through their pockets for loose change. So like that has not aged well. And I guess Princess, like the passivity of Princess Buttercup, you just couldn't do anymore, could you? Like as a heroine to be so fey and passive. They're the only two things that occurred to me. Oh, those two aspects probably you couldn't get away with anymore, but everything else feels fresh almost.
I feel like the Buttercup thing definitely plays on kind of classic fairy tales, that sort of damsel in distress. I have no defense for the Doctor.
Okay.
But yes, all those characters, like certainly Carrie Hill's acting in the main role certainly carries it a long way, and it's backed up though by just about everyone in their respective roles there. So, I mean, Wallace Shawn as Vicini, I couldn't imagine anyone else doing that. Apparently, Danny DeVito was down to be doing that one, and I'm just glad it was him though, because I just can't imagine anyone else delivering that line.
A slight vicious edge to him, though.
Yeah.
But he's got it because he seems to be obviously not in a position to really have that role of a leader. And, you know, he's obviously downtrodden as much as the other guys have been. And he's just, you know, small man syndrome almost coming out. But small intellect syndrome as well. And you get to the battle of wits. It's or ego, I guess, is there.
So
he's so funny in the way
to kill.
Yeah, actually, yeah, he doesn't worry about killing him, does he?
No. He doesn't knock out.
But it's a clever scene in that it's almost philosophical, the whole process of the battle of wits, because it's all making assumptions, and he's assumed the wrong thing from the beginning and making all these ridiculous arguments about philosophers being, you know, dumb compared to him, and he's missed the original premise that he assumed something was what it was, and both cups are poisoned. So so really great scenes. Christopher Guest,
but he swaps them.
As you were saying, Christopher Guest, he's so good.
As Count Rugen, you don't recognize him like when you see him in his own films. It's not what you used to with Christopher Guest, though. No. He disappears into that's for sure. It's quite well done.
Yeah, and
Go on, you go, Monica.
I have to say, to switch to a different character, Mandy Patinkin, who plays Inigo Montoya, gets the best lines in the entire film. He's like the MVP in this movie. Like, all of my favorite quotes are from him. The best being, "Let me explain. No, there's too much. Let me sum up."
Yeah.
That is relatable content right there.
Yeah, a lot of school students out there, when they're writing their essays, goes, "Oh, why don't they just ask me to summarize rather than explain?" No, it's great.
Yeah, and the sword fight between him and Carrie Ills on the Cliffs of Insanity, like, it's not a realistic fight in any sense of the word, but it's damn entertaining, and it's so well choreographed.
I agree. The choreography there is fantastic. It's kind of a play on the old Errol Flynn sort of stuff, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
But no, some really great sword play there.
It's really, because they're fencing, they're not sword fighting.
Oh,
yes, that's true. They are fencing.
Pardon moi.
No, but it's their sword fighting as far as the story is concerned. But yeah, it is a sort of fencing.
Well, it embraces the tone of the film, like the you know, aerobatics on the swinging on the like. And it's totally ludicrous moments to stop your sword fight to have a twirl. Like,
and they just have all this banter going between which forms of fencing or their techniques that they're using. It's like, there's one thing you don't know about me. I'm fighting with my left hand, and I'm not left-handed.
And I think the speech leading up to the sword fight, like the dialogue exchange between the two of them on the cliff, is just one of the best, like, bizarrely warming moments that precedes, you know, an attempted murder I've ever.
I guess it comes back to an honor system in a way that you sort of see in medieval settings and fantasy settings. There's this respect and honor that you have to your opponent. You know, it's when Inigo says to you know, Wesley, you know, you seem a decent fellow, I'd hate to kill you, and then, you know, Wesley just goes, you seem a decent fellow, I'd hate to die. It's just, it's polite.
And he's like, but he's tired. He's like, no, take your time. It's all right.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, let's just chill. Let me tell you about my tragic backstory.
Yeah. But it's like in that moment you don't question the.
No.
It's just like, yeah, of course.
No, and who would have thought that villains could be so affable and charming and, you know, almost anti-heroes in a sense.
It does sort of, I guess, become a portent to them being the heroes in the end too. So
it does. Yeah.
You know, it just shows that they're not quite what they seem, I guess. Chris Sarandon.
Yes.
he's always pretty good.
He's always
He's
good.
always good.
So who does he play?
He's Prince Humperdinck.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's
It's one jarring thing for me because this wasn't far out from Fright Night and things like that. So for me, I'm seeing the vampire from Fright Night being a prince, and it's. But he sort of just strolls along with that same gravitas of.
See, I would have seen Dog Day Afternoon just before I saw this. So, where he was the transvestite lover of Al Pacino.
Now that would have been a different experience.
That was different.
But
like, what I love about it is like he borders on the ridiculous, but he's never like the prince from Shrek. He never tips over into absolute ridiculousness. There's occasionally moments where you see looks across his face and you think, oh man, it is hurtful to you actually the way they insult you, like, or the way she doesn't want to marry you. Like he just gets you to empathize just a little bit, so that just that little sense of realism keeps creeping in there every time you think it's just absolute farce. No, there just is a little bit of realism.
I think, I think some of it goes back to princely entitlement as well. You know, why doesn't the beautiful princess want me? You know, I'm this prince of this great kingdom of Florian. I'm also this amazing hunter that is, you know, of great repute. But it does hurt his feelings a little bit, yeah.
He's a sensitive soul.
I have to say, there's an underlying influence in the comedy throughout this, and I'd have to tip my hat to Monty Python.
Yeah.
In a lot of moments there, you just get that feeling of a Monty Python-esque moment, you know, from the marriage.
Yeah. I have in my notes marriage.
But and then just the battle of wits, and you know, I don't think that means what you mean it to, sort of comments, and just all these sort of sudden, really clever reflections on what's going on in front of you.
And a bit of Mel Brooks as well, right? Like I feel like it's very much in that ballpark as well.
I feel like that's what got Kerry Earls Men in
Robin Hood,
Tights, like that sort of the playing Wesley.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
I was just looking to sort of it's definitely that sort of you know, not take the mickey out of fantasy films, but it's certainly not your conventional fantasy film. And I wasn't around in the 80s, so forgive me, but like looking at like the fantasy what was that for?
No, why should we forgive you? I mean, come on.
Fuck you. Looking at like the fantasy genre around the time, so you've got like Conan at like 82, you've got Beastmaster, Excalibur, you've got all these fantasy movies that do sort of take themselves kind of painfully seriously. And then we get this, and then we get stuff like Willow after Princess Bride, which is definitely kind of more of the quirky, funny fantasy stuff. So it's sort of interestingly placed that they're all kind of these, like Conan's a really cynical fantasy story, like. And a lot of those films are, and I guess it's sort of like almost a game changer in the sense of its sort of irreverence to the genre.
Yeah, because Excalibur's great, but it is almost portentous, actually. I think it tips over into self-seriousness. And you're right, it is a nice flick in the second half of the 80s to get this, and you're right, Willow, where we say, we can do fantasy, but we don't have to be so earnest and faithful. We can actually have a modern sensibility, because Excalibur felt like it had to be like, and maybe Conan's slightly different, but yeah, like let's historically excavate what it was actually like back then, and these felt fresh actually.
I
and
think
modern.
I think maybe the one film that might beat The Princess Bride to the post in this kind of sense with restructuring or reimagining a fantasy film would be perhaps Labyrinth, which was released the year before. It's got that Jim
Yeah.
Henson Muppet vibe.
It's a different kind of it's not
kind of
doing that
fantasy.
kind of sword and sorcery fantasy though. It's sort of more
No.
well, like kind of fairy tale-y type, but in the kind of like urban fairy tale.
With David Bowie as the Goblin
Yeah,
King.
crotch stuffing
But-
Goblin Kings.
But I do think those two films are linked in that kind of way where they're trying to look at, fairy tales, fantasy, those sorts of stories in a very different way from what was previously represented in films like Conan. So
I guess it's also just appealing to a broader audience too. Like I feel like I'd have no qualms letting my kids watch Princess Bride, but Conan probably off the table for quite a long time. But I mean, it also comes back to source material too. Conan's these, really grim Robert Howard, blood of my blood stories that are a bit different to the Princess Bride. But, I think Conan influenced the genre where you've got all these kind of Beastmaster and these kind of really absurd Dolph Lundgren-esque characters running around after Arnie to go to kind of this and Labyrinth too. And that, kind of not the big chunky warriors fighting things for honor.
Yeah. And that's right, isn't it? Like those almost sort of become, like where's your economy go there? Like they have to get bigger and stronger after Conan. Whereas what's so fun about this is Wesley is physically incapacitated. Like dragging him around the set is so funny to have this great,
and he's still heroic.
And he still manages to be heroic even when he's lying on the bed. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Or when he's being dragged around by Fezzik, who's like doing his best. You're doing amazing, sweetie.
I'm gonna leave you here. Just
And funnily enough, Andre the Giant wasn't the first pick for the character of Fezzik. Arnold Schwarzenegger was.
Well, actually, Andre the Giant was the first pick, but they couldn't get him, and so they were exploring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I think even Liam Neeson at some point as Andre the Giant, but he was only 6 foot something.
That would have been so weird.
But
how perfect would his diction have been?
you get clear enunciation in the rhyming.
Yeah.
But fortunately, Andre the Giant became available when they went to film it, and I just that's a gold point to it. It's like I don't think he could put anyone else in there so effectively because he does have that warmth.
Yeah.
And reading all the backstory, he called everyone boss and stuff because he doesn't like being intimidating by his size, and it just shines through in his character.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, World Wrestling Federation, for freeing him up.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon, you evil person.
sitting by counting his money.
Smoking a massive cigar.
Yeah.
I want to point out the music by Mark Knopfler as well. Like it's so restrained for that time.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of guitar and I guess it's a bit of synthesizer sound, but it's not what you'd expect out of the 80s. No. And it still holds up.
It's not,
I'll give you a good example.
To the moon and back.
Lady Hawk. Go and watch Lady Hawk. Yeah. If you've never seen Lady Hawk, go watch Lady Hawk and just try and get past that soundtrack. It's so hard.
That's Broderick?
Yes.
And the Replicant?
The Replicant.
What's his name? Rutger Hauer.
Yes, it is.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but the music in that fantasy at that time, just it's slapping you in the face with this horrible 80s rock sort of sound. Whereas Mark Knopfler really did consider what was being played for, and it suits it so well. I was actually surprised when I went back to it.
Yeah, there's some great moments in the soundtrack. There's one bit where Fezzik has to knock the door, and Tiger is bashing against it, and every time the music just hits it just as he hits it, boom, 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 boom. Just great,
Yeah.
great little technical moments in this film.
And visuals, everything's sort of so well composed, and it's done for that visual narrative. I think you could watch a lot of this film knowing what's going on without hearing a thing.
Yeah.
Quite easily. So, really well made film. I do enjoy it.
No, it's just it's a fun movie. It absolutely is studied academically at film school and things like that. However, you can drop those glasses if you want and just have a really good time with it.
Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm really glad I was pushed by this podcast. I don't know if I ever would have tackled it. Just felt like I just missed my moment, but I hadn't missed my moment. If there's anyone out there, who think, oh, if I'd been in my teens or in my 20s, I should watch. No, pick it up now. Like, doesn't matter what age you are. I think you'll still find it fun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Great fun. So there is rumors floating around that they're going to remake it soon enough.
No.
And
Leave it alone.
Yeah.
Carrie Alls was interviewed about it, and he said, there is a shortage of perfect movies in this world. It would be a pity to damage this one.
Oh,
Respect to Carrie Alls.
So good.
And I don't think anyone could say it better. That is pretty perfect.
The Dread Pirate Roberts has spoken.
Yeah. So, no, I don't believe it should be remade.
No.
I
If you
just
do,
don't think it
it's
could.
not going to be this. It's not going to be
No.
the same thing at all.
No.
I don't see the point, to be honest.
Yeah, just leave it alone. It's perfect.
Well, we might talk about that with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? Like, with
We can lead into that. Oh, yes.
just to foreshadow a bit of a discussion that I can imagine.
Sizzle. Cool. The Princess Bride. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us to talk about this wonderful, wonderful film. And I'm glad we got
You're very
to
welcome.
force you to watch it. I didn't realize you'd missed out all these years.
Yeah. No, very happy to.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Pop Culture. I have been Scott.
I'm still Jason.
And I'm still Monica.
And I'm Dave. Please. All right.
See you later.